The opinions and statements made by the guests of the Success in Practice podcast are their own, and I do not endorse or accept responsibility for their positions. Any information given by myself or the guests is educational in intention and not to be taken as medical advice. If you choose to act on the content involved in the podcast, you do so at your own risk. Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Success in Practice podcast. I'm joined today by Bruce Duncan. In over 30 years as an osteopath, Bruce has treated people from all walks of life. He has been an osteopath to the Australian Open Tennis Tournament since 2004 and the Hawthorn Football Club since 2015. He has previously lectured at Victoria University and RMIT and taught on many postgraduate courses for osteopaths. Bruce founded North Carlton Osteopathy in 1998 and continues to practice there to this day. Over the years, he has attended many postgraduate courses himself, always looking to learn and develop, which has culminated in a wide variety of treatment and management skills at his disposal, which we will ask him about today. From deep tissue massage and expertise in joint manipulation to gentle balancing techniques, Bruce can tailor treatments quite well, and his experience has given him a good stead in terms of being one of the top practitioners down in Victoria. So I'm really glad that Bruce has joined me today. I've been trying to tee this up for a while. Bruce, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Sammy. It's a pleasure to be on. I've been really enjoying your podcast, mate. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm glad that people of your caliber are listening.
Yeah. Cheers.
It makes this job a lot easier, mate. I guess where I want to get started, where I'm starting with everybody, is want to get a little bit about your backstory. Tell us about you. Tell us about you growing up. Where did you grow up? Tell us about your early influences, and I guess some of the school years, formative years. Tell us about that.
Sure. I grew up right here in Melbourne, in the eastern suburbs. Pretty unremarkable, although one of 7 kids, so number 6 of 7, just went to a local high school in Box Hill, and it was fairly unremarkable. Just always interested in sport and guess medicine and the body and
Did you play sport as a young kid?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
What did you play?
Tennis at a good club level, competition, and did some coaching, and played a season of footy and a season of cricket when I was quite young, and worked out that I hit a decent tennis ball. So didn't progress that so much, but yeah, I've always enjoyed watching all sports, but tennis was my thing.
Right, and I guess going to high school, did you go into university doing osteopathy straight out of high school?
Straight into osteopathy.
And so, at what point, I guess, in your teenage years, did you kind of know what you wanted to do? Did you want to go down that path into healthcare, medicine, body work? Did you kind of have that idea at a young age?
Yeah, it's really. I think it's so tough when you're 17, 18 to know exactly what you want to do. But yeah, just as I said, I was sort of always interested in the medical side of things, and my family randomly knew John Pitcher's parents. My mum and dad knew John Pitcher's parents, so I'd heard of osteopathy via them. And so started to read up on it, and sort of decided midway through year 12 that course looked really interesting. Just did some further reading about it, and it was a relatively new course at RMIT at the time. Liked the sound of it, but went in with a little naive at the time, but yeah, once I got in there, I was right into it.
Yeah, right. And I guess, was there anything else in your high school years that you thought might have developed some of the skills, I guess, that you continue to have to this day? Like, were there things at a young age that, whether it's communication or whether it's kind of like, being personable, were there things at a young age that you had that made you, I guess, more empathetic, agreeable, the kind of personality types that we see with good practitioners? Um, did you display any of those at a young age?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. Um, Again, it's. I feel like I was so young, Sammy. Like it was just high school. It's hard to know. But I guess coming from a big family, you had to learn communication skills,
Mm,
quite sink or swim in some ways.
yeah.
That would have been an influence. But playing competitive sport does teach you a lot of
Mm.
skills in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Speaking to Ann Cooper on one of the podcasts, I asked her the question about, what she looks for in a graduate when she goes to hire, and she said sport.
Yeah.
That the fact they have to play a team sport,
Yes.
it teaches them to share and to kind of work as a team, and I guess put your ego aside and work together, I guess. And they're just some of the things that you're discussing just then as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'd agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So finished off high school, went to university at RMIT. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And how far away was that from home?
Yeah. It was a 40-minute drive. I got a bomb of a car to get there. It was a ripper. I often would get randomly pulled over by the police just because it looked so
Mate,
crap.
I can empathise. I can empathise.
It was
I remember buying a car to go to university. The first car I bought, it was like $700, right? And my first trip down to university, I was the same as you. I had to travel 40 minutes. And my first trip there, made it there. On the way back, the belt on the timing belt just flew off. Just the thing clocked out.
fantastic.
So the guy that I bought it off, we it was a family friend, and we called him up. The poor bloke, he came and he took the car and just gave me the money back and went
Oh,
and fixed
brilliant.
it. So that was, yeah. But I empathise with what you're saying there. So
My dad ran a couple of service stations at that time. He'd gone from big business into running some mobile service stations, and my HQ Kingswood actually died on his driveway, and I think he paid the guy $400 and popped a new engine in it, and it used to be a gunmetal grey, and it had the paint had oxidized, so you could see the pink undercoat coming through. So
that's
and it had
lovely,
dents all over. So
mate. That's just Australiana in a snapshot.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
right. So
that's where I did some part time work doing shifts in the service station for a
oh,
year.
good.
So yeah,
Good. That would, yeah, that's good. Talking to a lot of people there, that would give you a lot of, I guess,
yeah,
experience in talking to different people. So okay, so you go to RMIT, you're kind of starry eyed, bit naive, walk in and you start learning osteopathy straight away. Was that how it was back then? I mean, that was a brand new course. What year was that? Sorry, Bruce.
yeah. That was um, 88.
And
Um,
that was still the Phillip Institute back then.
Yeah, I think it might have been that first year. Might have been Phillip Institute, and it might have changed to RMIT
Right.
by my second year.
And
Yeah,
were you the first year
I
through
was
or
the
the
third year to go through. So
third year to
yeah,
go through? Right.
yeah. So
And okay, right. And so you walked in there. What was your first class of osteopathy like?
yeah, I do remember it, and it was sort of a palpation class with Eva Benesh,
Right.
and the daughter of a very famous. Her her dad was a well-known, amazing practitioner in Melbourne, Yuri Benesh, who we got to see a couple of times through the course that he came and visited, and an amazing manipulator, and would sort of do sort of a whole body manipulations in 5 or 10 minutes. But yeah, so Eva's class was a real eye opener, actually. Straight up, as a very green 18-year-old.
Well, tell us about that. Why was it such an eye opener? Like, what was specifically? What was it like? I mean, what got you?
Well, yeah, it was fantastic getting sort of hands on straight away, and it was, and I made some connections with some fellow friends that were straight out of high school as well. But there was a real mix in the class. There was some, real mature age students, and it was a really interesting class, and we all did well.
Was there a lot of osteopathy talk? Like, the Eva, did she give you a lot of anecdotes about what she saw in clinic? Was there an experience-based thing where she would say, look, I saw this last week, this is what I did, patient came back and felt like this, and this is what changed, and did you kind of get a lot of that? Was there a lot of talk about osteopathy and how it affected people's lives?
Yeah, I mean, I consider us, we were really blessed in that we got to be taught by a whole range of some of them that we younger, but the younger practitioners, but they were all practicing. There wasn't a heap of full-time practitioners, but they were all working, and yes, they would absolutely relay stories. So there was a young Wael Mahmood who was running the clinic, and there was John Pitcher taught us technique, and there was Cynthia Tucker was a osteopathic legend who came and taught us, and so there was a big sort of British sort of contingent. But there was also cameos from Sydney as well. So Ivan Lolomon would come down and every so often, and just larger than life, and so inspiring. And I remember one time he early on he I don't know how he got to, but he might have had a position in the equivalent of Osteopathy Australia at the time, but he addressed both the osteos and the chiros studied together, and he got up there and basically told the chiropractors that whoever it was, BJ Palmer or Daniel DD Palmer, was a student of AT still, and so virtually told them that chiropractic was just a spin-off of osteopathy. So that it was the best. It was very considering the osteopathic crew was a lot smaller than the chiros. For someone like Ivan, larger than life, to stand up there and give it to them was pretty
well,
fun.
mate, I guess when the truth's on your side, it's easy to kind of, make those statements. I remember meeting Ivan the first time when I was at university, and we had him come in for a special appearance. I'd never met Ivan before. I didn't even know what he looked like. And we had some other people talking, and I was sitting way at the back of the room, like literally on the back wall on a chair. And along comes this bloke, and he sits next to me. He's a big guy, he's kind of belly, beard, and, a bit, he's a bit sweaty. I think he's just rushing to get in. And whoever the person that was talking was, he would just, as they were talking, he would say things to me about the body and about what they're talking about, and it was just they're like little gems of little information. And then the person who was talking said something about the sacrum. Sorry, not the sacrum, the pelvis. They were talking about the pelvis and the anatomy of the pelvis, and he turns over to me. He goes, "Look, don't worry about all that." He goes, the blokes, those guys in Scotland that wear skirts, and they carry those big those big poles. You know, they carry those big poles and they balance them around and they throw them. I said, yeah. And he goes, that's the pelvis. He goes, that's the pelvis. He goes, it's when, you know, when the pole goes to the left, you know, you kind of tilt to the right. When the pole goes to the right, you kind of tilt to the left. And he goes, if you just remember that, you'll be right, knowing everything you need to know about the pelvis. To this day, I'll never forget that. And it
Nice.
still works in the clinic to this day. So I didn't even know who he was. And then at the end of it, okay, they go, everyone all right, Ivan Lullerman. And up he gets, he's next to me, and he just walks down to the front of the room and he starts having a chat. And I'll never forget that. But
Yeah.
God rest his soul, he's passed now, but wish we had more of him around. Mate, so tell me, I guess the course in those days, I guess when you went through, the concept of evidence-based practice was almost non-existent within osteopathy, within any kind of manual medicine, really, and probably within medicine itself. It just hadn't really made its way in there. Most people practiced from, I guess, a phenomenology point of view, clinical experience, and that kind of thing. And that's not to say that that's unscientific, but did it feel like, looking back on it now, was it kind of like the wild, wild west for you guys? You know, did people just come out and say things and do things that you just couldn't get away with now?
Yeah, it was there was a real sort of dichotomy in the course, in that all the science was taught to a really high standard. So we did full dissection anatomy. We did we did chemistry for a year in our first year, which I still don't know why, but we did full microbiology for a year, pathology. It's a really high standard. They were really difficult exams. So all the science was really strong, but the osteopathy was just osteopathy, and it was taught by, as I said, really, really interesting practitioners, and there was no restrictions or no limitations on teaching indirect and direct. You know, we had Maxwell Fravel teach us, you know, indirect and cranial osteopathy quite extensively. Like, amazing. You know, one of the, you know, leading practitioners in that field. And we had, you know, practitioners like Phil Tehan, who had the physio background and osteopathy, and who taught us it as well. So yeah, we just thought that was normal.
And so I guess I'm just going to kind of play back what you said to me. You learnt the scientific aspect of the human body at a very high level, but yet you still felt the osteopathy permeated through that, because that was also taught to you at a high level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Absolutely.
So, and so I guess that's an example of how both of those things can kind of align as well, and they don't have to be in opposition to each other, I guess. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that bit. And then so student clinic at that time, was that something that was around? And was it? You're the third year through, so I wouldn't assume it would be quite busy. It would be something that would still be building up. Is that correct?
Yeah, the student clinic was placed fairly well. It was small to start with, and then they built a whole new student clinic, a pretty flash building in the end. And we just got patients from a lot of other students and staff from the university, and we'd try and get, you know, friends and family to come in to the student clinic. And I mean, it was a fair while ago, but I feel like it wasn't too tough to get our numbers and get our experience. And we had good clinicians helping us out. Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember who I spoke to a couple of weeks ago on the podcast regarding, I guess, some of the standards that were set for you guys, especially they mentioned Philip Tehan, who they described as somebody who was quite tough in terms of, making sure that you kept to that standard. Was that your experience there? Was Phil somebody who really demanded a lot from you and demanded a high a high expectation of quality.
Yeah, I feel like our exams were quite, again, to a high standard, and students failed them, and they'd have to resit, and yeah, it wasn't a Mickey Mouse sort of caper.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really had to prepare and practice. Yeah.
Okay, and on the osteopathy side of things, in terms of when you would get asked a question like discuss some of the osteopathic considerations when you're looking at a certain problem, and this might be a question you would get asked in an exam. Was that something that, like, how would they assess that? How would they assess your osteopathic brain, I guess? Because I don't know if that happens a lot these days in terms
Mm.
of within the education of in the current climate. Give us some insight into that because I think people will be interested. Were you examined on your osteopathic thought process?
It, again, it was a long time ago, Sammy, but my recollection was absolutely like you had to sort of nail the diagnosis to start with, but
Mm.
we definitely weren't thinking just locally. It was
Yeah.
always to think broadly
Mm.
and to see the interrelationship, how that area could be affected by secondaries and overall body balance. Yeah,
And
that was definitely
yeah.
emphasised.
And you were pushed into that within the examinations as well, right? Like, people would say, what are some of the things that you'd look at? You'd have to mention those things to actually pass or do well in the exam.
Yeah, absolutely. Particularly to get a decent,
Yeah,
mark for sure. Yeah.
yeah, right. And I guess, all right. So, what year did you graduate, Bruce?
So yeah, well, when we studied, it was 4.5 years, and then we did a 6 month field work,
Hmm.
and I came up to Sydney. There wasn't a
Right.
lot of osteopaths in Melbourne.
Mm.
There was still a higher number of osteopaths in Sydney. So
Where'd you do
um,
that? Where'd you do your field work?
so I did a few days with Tom Samuels in Parramatta.
I know Tom
Yeah,
with
and
his
then
bow,
I did a few days. Hmm?
with his bow tie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a few days with James and Kerry Harrison out in Windsor.
Yes. Yes. Good
And
people.
yeah, and I particularly love that experience, and I
Yeah.
learned a lot from them.
Yeah.
Beautiful people. I really enjoyed the drive out to there, and yeah, it was just really gentle. But yeah, James was able to, like, it was just this gentle soul that was able
Mm.
to be, treat indirect, but he could also do deep
Hmm.
tissue and do
Mm.
great manips, and so he was a real inspiration in that regard early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tom, I remember going out and observing Thomas because I'm local to Parramatta. My current clinic is in Parramatta, one of
Mm.
them. And so I remember going and visiting Thomas. He was actually the first practitioner that I observed after I started my university education because he was close to home. So I went out and sat with him and we, sat throughout his day and we observed. And I remember the building he was in, the exact building. It was number 10 Gross Street, right?
Mm.
And so, I went back to university, went through my whole education, went and worked in a totally different area, worked with a couple of other practitioners, decided to open up my own clinic in Parramatta, opened up the clinic and kind of had it at a certain location. And in 2009, I moved locations and ended up leasing the exact same building that Thomas had
Oh,
his clinic in on number 10 Grove Street. And so I thought that was just serendipity how that worked out. But yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I'll never forget that. And but Thomas is a lovely practitioner,
Yeah.
very good practitioner too, and was very very thorough with what he did.
Yeah.
I remember he had these old tables that he'd unclick something and the table would
Yes.
just turn and flip and go upside down, and it was
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah. He positioned particularly the lower half of the table to
Yeah.
sort of counteract a sacral torsion,
Yeah, he
basically.
did that.
Yeah.
He would do
Yeah.
that. I remember he did that. He goes, "Watch this sacral torsion." He'd unscrew something and the whole bed would move. He goes, "Watch." It was quite cool. It was quite
Didn't
cool.
didn't work so well when the he let it go too fast, and the whole
Yeah.
rear of the table bounced back into
Yeah.
neutral, and one patient got a bit of a fright with that.
Yeah, I'm sure they would. All right, so field work. I want to ask you a bit about field work because you mentioned that, and one of the things that I've been discussing with people here on the podcast is that current kind of education models. Like I've discussed current education models, but
Mm.
one of the things that would I think work really well is moving to an internship system where we could then at least ensure that graduates gets a sense of osteopathy in the way that me and you, I guess, were given. It was given to us, which I think is important. I think it's important to have a point of difference. And I guess one of the ways that you could do that is through internships.
Mm.
Give us your opinion on that. And given your time as an intern, did you get that? Did you feel like your internship was crucial in developing you as a young practitioner?
Yeah, it definitely contributed. It there's nothing like being in practice
Mm.
and learning and in learning from an experienced practitioner. It's such an important part of the journey.
What did it give you?
But big pardon.
What did it give you? Did it give you confidence? What did it give you, that internship for 6 months? Like, how do you feel it changed you and made you a better practitioner upon then being able to be registered and practice on your own?
It just contributes to just seeing both having your own patients, but also being in the room and shadowing the principal. It just sort of more normalizes the process and gives you confidence that, hey, I can do this too. It's not without not out of the realm of possibility that you can
Mm.
achieve what these experienced practitioners can achieve. So just being given the license and the the ability to sit with the experienced practitioners, it was brilliant.
Did it show you that the results that they could get was something that you could get too? Like, did it remove the magic? I guess, like,
Yeah,
sometimes we look at these practitioners, we think, wow, like there's something that they can do that we can't. But then when we see them, and I guess live with them in terms of practice, we shadow them around. We can tend to see that. Well, no, there's a system to what they're doing here. We can do this. Hello, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone for watching and listening to the podcast. If you have received value from this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel on whichever platform that you are listening on. If any of the conversations have resonated with you and you feel that I can help elevate your practice, you can find me at successinpractice.net. That is, the Success in Practice program can be found at successinpractice.net. The Success in Practice program is the signature program that takes a practitioner who may be struggling with retaining patients. They may not be certain about building effective treatment strategies, and they may feel somewhat anxious and doubtful about what they are going to do with a patient. And they are not really accelerating in the real world of private practice. It takes this practitioner and it turns their careers right around to the point where the patients have an effective diagnosis and a real treatment plan that they can take home. Patients are happy to book in multiple sessions with you and they are confident about your abilities. And more importantly, you now have direction and are confident about your own abilities. The program streamlines how you operate as a practitioner. Guys, you should have been taught this at university, but you weren't. You may have been practicing for the last few years thinking there has to be a better way. There has to be a more effective way of engaging with patients and getting them results. Well, there is. And this is what the program delivers. Go to successinpractice.net and check out the options available to you. See where I can help you easily grow your patient list and finally earn the rewarding income that you deserve. For all the information on how you can reach me personally, check out the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you'll find a link to the chat transcripts from these podcasts. These are valuable and a wealth of information. I really hope that you're enjoying the podcast. Guys, leave a comment if there's any questions on this episode. And please don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Now, back to the show.
that's exactly right. Yeah, and I sort of feel that a lot myself. I don't feel like I'm doing anything particularly special at times. And we, and achieving some good results from the patients, and it can absolutely, with some confidence and some, younger practitioners can definitely achieve that.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about you as a young practitioner. After your internship, registration happens, and then you go back to Melbourne. Is that right?
Straight back to Melbourne, yeah.
Right. Straight back to
Still love
Melbourne.
Sydney, but my heart was in Melbourne.
Oh, look, who doesn't love the cold weather and the cloudy skies? So okay, back to Melbourne. What happened then? You went to
So
work.
I'd also, so one of the practitioners, one of the senior students that was in the first year, Glenn Bales, who's a really accomplished practitioner himself. He was already working with Lal McAllister, who was this grandfather osteopath in Strathmore, just near Essendon in Melbourne, just in one of the northern suburbs there. And so, yeah, I'd sort of developed a relationship with Glenn, observing him, and there was a basically, I asked whether there was a position there. So I went straight back into a job at Lowell McAllister's, who was 76 at the time. He sort of hadn't had formal training in osteopathy. He'd done sort of like a nighttime naturopathy degree that had some osteopathy, and had sort of got registration through the grandfather clause back in the day.
Yeah.
A really talented, hands-on practitioner who didn't have, bless his soul, didn't have great medical knowledge, but it was a very like lots of soft tissue work, great skills in manipulation, and that was a pretty much an open door policy at his clinic, and he would come in virtually with every one of my patients to start with, and we'd diagnose them together, with a standing exam, standing flexion test, and he'd say, "Oh, look at this, look at this, look at this," and so I'd do my thing, and then he'd often come back and check at the end, and do any little adjustments that needed to be done. So I was there for 5 years, and it was a really solid grounding. So I got pretty accomplished at all the whole variety of manipulative techniques, and lots of soft tissue work.
You mentioned that there wasn't a whole bunch of osteopaths in Melbourne at that time compared to what there were in Sydney, and you. Was it Lyle McAllister? Is that right?
Lyle McAllister, yeah.
Sorry,
His exact full name was Alistair McAllister, if you don't mind. So pretty Scottish,
right.
But
so
no, it's Lyle, L-A-L.
Yeah. All right. So Lyle McAllister. Was he advertising a position, or did you just go kind of knock on his door and say, "Hey"? Had you observed him before, and is that how you did it? Tell us how you got about
my
that
relationship
position.
with Glenn, who was his associate. Yeah.
So Glenn kind of put in a word for you, and he just went and said, "Hey, Lyle, I'd love to work here," and he said, "Yep, come on board."
Come on,
right.
And it was a 9 to 5 clinic, Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
Wore the white tunic type thing.
Yeah.
It was so old school.
Okay.
The fake wood paneling on the cubicles. They were tiny rooms, no desk, fixed height table.
Yeah.
Just a little stool in the corner for the patient to chuck their gear on, and away you go.
And you had a wooden stool, I'm assuming, not even a wheeled one.
No stool.
No stool.
Just no sitting. No, there was just a fixed plinth, a fixed bed, a metal bed in the middle of the room.
Wow.
And just
okay. All right. So at that time, how many people graduated with you when you graduated? What was your cohort like? What was the size of it like?
Yeah, tiny. It was. I think we started with like 26 or 28.
Yeah.
And only a dozen or 14 actually ended up graduating in our year.
Right, and all of you had no trouble finding work. I mean, from what you remember, I
Yeah,
mean, when you start at 26, you spend 4.5 years with people, you end up with 12.
yeah,
You build pretty close relationships with people,
yeah,
right? Like it's
yeah,
and so you kind of get to know what they're doing.
yeah.
Did anyone have trouble getting work?
I don't recall. No, I think everyone was,
Yeah,
placed. And
yeah,
I mean, Michael Solano was in my year,
right.
who's in Bondi. And there's all, everyone. A few people went to New Zealand, and everyone was able to obtain work.
Okay.
Mm.
And early on in your career, mate, tell us how you practiced. Was it just fairly, in diagnosis in terms of trying to get to the source of the pain and looking at some of the strain patterns that underlying what's going on, and then you're a fairly direct practitioner. Is that correct?
Yeah, especially early on, and that 5 years with Lau McAllister, like, someone would come in with a headache, and you'd start. He'd sort of see this fascial strain pattern right up from the calf. So you'd start working, doing soft tissue through, lateral calf, adjust the fibula head, free up the hip, SIJ, L5, ribs. He was massive on ribs, manipulating ribs, and so first ribs, mid ribs,
Yeah.
and so just as I said, lots looking at different strain patterns, and
Were you guided to treat specific to a pattern, or was it more of a general kind of sweeping up of somatic dysfunction as you went along?
definitely looking at particularly strain patterns.
Yeah.
Looking at a longer leg on one side. So on the shorter leg side, classic, there'd be a mid rib restriction on that side that would be lifting the pelvis on the shorter leg side. You'd manipulate that, and it could sometimes level up the pelvis. You then
Yeah.
work on the longer leg side in terms of soft tissue, and then you work your way back up the
Yeah.
system. Yeah.
Yeah, all right,
Mm.
great. And so that developed you, and I guess the way you thought as a early practitioner. Did you continue to practice in that fashion? When did things ever change for you? Did you start looking elsewhere? Tell us about, I guess, your maybe not your early career, but maybe
Mm.
5 years on. What
Yeah.
was that like for you?
Yeah. I think, after 5 years, I was sort of ready to branch out and do my own thing. And I set up a practice in, uh, well, a block down the road from where I still am in North Carlton. So in '98, I I just rented a house, and lived in the back of the house and worked from the front couple of rooms.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky that some patients found me and followed me, and so I built up pretty quickly. And it took on wasn't too long before I took on an associate because I had some overflow.
Yeah.
And I guess my curiosity for osteopathy took me, back to my student days. Felt quite accomplished with the structural side of thing, and but that approach wasn't suitable for everyone sometimes. So thought about my days where I learnt some of the indirect stuff, and that really fascinated me.
Mm.
So I did a few SCTF courses, and then later on did some biodynamic courses, and I ended up, over time, I did the full 9 phases of the biodynamics course. Went over to see, when Jim Jallis came to Australia, did his attended his course again, and then went to Portland, Oregon, a few years to do some courses with him, and also help on the biobasics course as a tutor. And so even though I still, largely still largely structural. There are patients that I treat completely indirectly and fully biodynamically. So I really enjoy that ability to change tack.
Right.
Sometimes hard when you've been quite physical and doing some deeper hands-on work,
Yeah.
and then going towards ease and the really gentle balancing stuff. But
Let
yeah,
me
I've learned to be able to do it. Okay.
let me ask you a question on that. So I had this discussion with John Abdullah, who's also done a lot of biodynamic, the levels that you discussed, and he practices in that. So John taught me, and John was taught by Ivan and Steve Porter, and Steve was an engineer and really kind of looked at the body in terms of moment arms and levers and how different strains will cause loading on certain tissues, and that would then I guess produce some pain in people, and how you could work at kind of alleviating those strain patterns. And
Mm.
so John worked in that fashion for a while, but then when you moved, so like yourself, kind of moved more into the indirect work and the biodynamic phase of things. But discussing it with him, I got the sense that he's a very structural practitioner,
Mm.
but I got the sense that I think the mind is still structural, but you just use the techniques that are a bit more indirect, but you still have that structural kind of idea of the pattern that you've developed in your brain in terms of what's going on. But instead of using a direct myofascial release or a direct manipulation to the joint, you might use a biodynamic technique because you can just unwind that tissue a little bit better in the patient because they have a certain presentation.
Yeah.
Would that be a correct assumption of what you kind of how you see things, or am I off track there?
No, that's really quite accurate. And yeah, and what I was saying before, it can be difficult to go, where you're doing hands-on structural stuff, and then it is almost a completely different mindset to go completely indirect and working with the fluid body.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I do. There are many times you're right. I do take just the indirect skills and apply them in to a more of a in the same strain pattern and the myofascial
Yeah,
strain pattern that I would look at structurally. But
yeah,
in that, I do what I think it does is that it starts to, and I mean, I teach this a lot to when I'm invited to other clinics and to my own associates. Is that just hanging in that space, it can broaden your mind and help you it helps your palpation skills, and but B, you can start to absolutely feel things beyond the local area that you're palpating, and so opening your mind to feeling changes in the body beyond where you're actually working, and
yeah,
that's and once you get a piece of that, it's amazing. Like
yeah.
it's really it's really cool.
I've had the privilege of observing some very good indirect practitioners. What I have noticed about them is they were at one point very good direct practitioners. I think I've got this idea in my head that like if you want to people that want to get to that level of direct or I guess indirect skill set, do you think it's best that they really develop their direct skills in terms of understanding joint barriers and being able to palpate different levels of tissue before they start to kind of look at more indirect layers, I guess? Would that be good advice to people?
Yeah, I mean that is really sound advice to emerging practitioners. There's no negativity. There's nothing wrong with getting really strong and accomplished from a direct point of view, even if you want to
Mm,
progress to an
mm,
indirect way of treating.
mm.
I'm sure there are plenty of, though, very accomplished indirect practitioners that have been naturally drawn to that way. But I certainly do know that there are a lot of good cranial and indirect practitioners that were, you're right, were very good structurally to start with.
That's just an observation. I mean, I don't consider myself. I mean, I've been doing this for about probably 20 years now, and I guess you start at that level of the 20-year experience mark. You start to see the guys that are still ahead in terms of experience, and the observation that I've made is that the really good ones that are really good at the indirect work, I haven't, they've all been great direct practitioners. It's just an observation that I've made, and I wonder if other people are seeing the same thing. So that's why I wanted to ask you that question. All right. So before I go on to asking about some things to do with sport performance, I want to ask you this question, and the reason I actually it wasn't on the run sheet, but I want to ask you it anyway. I had a conversation on the sidelines of the recent osteopathy conference in Sydney with a few practitioners who have either your vintage or maybe a little bit less than that, but we had this conversation and we're talking about osteopathy, and somebody said, well, what is osteopathy? And there's this kind of idea out there that we're all moving towards, I guess, whether you're an osteopath, a chiropractor, a physio, we shouldn't be really clinging on to osteopathy. It should be more about just patient-centered, what's best for the patient. And if we get that from a physio, or we get that from an osteo, or we get that from whoever, it doesn't really matter. And we shouldn't really hold on to any point of difference if it's not necessary. And so I want to ask you this first question. Bruce, to you, what is osteopathy?
Wow. I'm supposed to be answering this to my fellow colleague, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, osteopathy, I still think it's a hands-on profession.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, yeah, and there's other parts of the
Well, so let me stop you there. I know you're answering it to your profession, but I guess we also have to make it that we're almost answering it to the patient as well. But many patients have asked you this,
yeah.
When they ask you about the difference of, and so what do you say? What do you tell them? I mean, what is the point of difference? What is osteopathy?
How I explain it to a patient, pretty simple. I say, as osteopaths, we won't just look at where you're feeling your problem. We'll try and work out the whole body pattern. And so we don't, if you're coming with a sore shoulder, won't just be looking at your shoulder. I'll be looking at all the related areas and how they might relate and how they might affect your problem. Our approach is generally hands-on, and we have a range of techniques that we can help free up areas that aren't moving so well, and we can give you some management advice as well, perhaps some exercises.
Right. And so I guess speaking to me now and us speaking as professionals, if I was to say to you that what you just described then is really based on the principles of osteopathy as we were taught those, would that be your definition of osteopathy in terms of what it is to be an osteopath? Are you really following those, body, mind, spirit, structure, function, homeostasis, regulation principles that were taught? Is that how you define osteopathy?
I think so. Yeah, I think the principles still stand up to this day, and I like to reflect on the principles as I treat, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And do you think that's something that we should be encouraging for the future of osteopathy?
Well, absolutely. And I still feel that, and my exposure with working alongside other health professionals, that's surely our difference, and our one wood is our ability to be hands-on and the ability to apply a range of techniques in that regard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess you just mentioned that you've worked with a whole bunch of other practitioners, and I guess there's no other place that you would have done more of that is within sport performance. Before I get to talking about it, tell us how you got into sport performance. I mean, you were with the Australian Open since 2005, or 2005, I think.
Mm.
And then you've been with Hawthorn Football Club. And for those listening, football is in AFL.
Yeah.
Hawthorn Football Club since 2015. How did those opportunities come about for you?
Through a bit of luck in each time. My first exposure to high performance sport was actually in sport aerobics, and my friend in Sydney again, Michael Slanu, was working in gyms and working with a few aerobics athletes. So I don't know whether you remember competitive aerobics, but they do some sort of like almost like a cross between a dance and a gymnastics routine on stage to music.
Yeah,
But
it's like
really,
cheerleaders. It's like the American cheerleader type.
a little bit like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's yeah, and a local woman, Sue Stanley, was world champion, and so Michael went to Sydney. I got to treat Sue and got to treat other sport aerobics. Anyway, long story short, I got invited to travel with the Australian team to the World Championships in San Diego, which was a great experience as a young practitioner. I was only a couple of years out. And yeah, but then tennis was from my background in tennis. There was a student at VU, Louise Field, who was a very accomplished professional tennis player before she did osteopathy, and we'd occasionally have a hit together. And I was lucky enough that she put my name forward to the organisers of the Australian Open, and
Were they looking for an osteopath at the Australian Open, or was it just?
yeah, they were. They just wanted. They basically have a player to this day. They have a player's book. I don't know whether it's actually still a physical book or whether it's just gone all electronic. I suspect it's electronic, but they just have a range of practitioners in that. That they're recommended practitioners, and so they ask me each year whether I'm happy to be a part of that. So I don't get to be on site. I have to say the Australian Open's a bit protected in that regard. Like, so the physios are a bit protective of their turf. So I've never actually got to work on site. But if a player wants to see an osteopath, then they can send them out to me in a courtesy car, basically, and I'll just treat them they'll make direct contact with me, and I'll treat them in my clinic. And it really only works out to be a couple of players each year because they're getting free treatment from the physios on site in the clinic. So it's only if they really specifically want to see an osteo. In regards to the AFL, back in probably it was about 2013. There was a particular player. So Hawthorn Footy Club were in a bit of a golden patch. They'd won the premiership in 2000. They won premiership 2013, 14, 15. One of their players, Will Langford, had basically a hamstring issue that they had scanned, and there was no frank tear in his hamstring, but he had hamstring pain, and they suspected it was coming from his lower back. And the physios, who are really good, they don't do any manipulative work to the lower back. They found out through one of the massage therapists that works there recommended me. They sent him out to me. I was able to manipulate his back and clear up his hamstring. It wasn't special. It wasn't difficult. And he was right to play. That happened again probably 6 months later. I was able to do the same thing. And then just before, so fast forward to 2014, just before the prelim final, Will Langford himself contacted me in the clinic. He copped a huge knock in his in his rib cage, and he was struggling to breathe, and I think he'd had scans. There was no fractures or anything, but he was just dysfunctional with his breathing. So he came and saw me. I was able to free up his thoracics and ribs, and just again, nothing special, but he was then best on ground in that prelim final, and was almost best on ground in the grand final. So the head of high performance who was at the time was Andrew Russell. He's a very open-minded sort of fella. He made contact with me and said we were interested in an osteopath coming to come and consult for us. He came and saw me in my clinic. He basically sat in the patient chair for about 2 minutes and said, "Well, we could talk all you like, but I really need to find out for myself whether you can actually treat.
Yeah.
So can you give me a treatment?" I gave him a treatment and sat down again and said, "Yep, you're in." And I then got a call from the head physiotherapist, just working out whether I was going to be a team player or not, so be on the same page as everyone. And because I think they'd had a poor experience in the past where they'd had a practitioner, I think it may have been an osteopath previously, who wasn't on the same page and was sort of saying, might have on the side been saying to players, "Oh, I think you should be doing this instead," and this just creates so much doubt in the player's mind, and so I was able to assure him that no, I can stay in my lane, no problem. I'm here to be of service and be of help to you and the players, and I'll leave the injury management and all that sort of thing up to the experts, and you can use my skills as you need. And
Right. So hold on a sec. I want to stop you there for a minute. So that was you back in 2015,
yeah.
right? And
in 2014, because I did the whole year in 2015. Yeah.
All right. So that was back in 2014. So that's what a good, that's probably almost 10 years ago, or 10 years ago. I mean, that's 20. You're out 20 years. You got 20 years on you. You got 20 years experience there. Why is it that it has to be that way in terms of, look, you got to toe the line, and why did you think that way in terms of, look, let them just worry about the injury management? If there was something that had to be said, were you prepared to say it, or was it just that you were just happy to be there and part of the team?
Yeah,
the reason why I'm asking you the question is that I think you need to be part of the team, and I think you need to have these conversations away from the players. But those conversations, there should be a culture where you can have those conversations.
There's no, and once I was there and once I was in, absolutely, it was much more collaborative. But and they've got a great attitude, and they'll ask me my opinion on different things and what did I find, but I still would defer to them in terms of rehabbing. They're pretty amazing in terms of their ability to get complex injuries and hamstring strains from a strength management point of view and a progression, running progression point of view. They're doing that all the time, and they're very impressive about it. They're very experienced. So I know more than some, but I still don't feel like I know more than what they do.
So you were happy to just stick to the somatic dysfunction side of things. Would that be correct? You were happy to look at the kind of the strain patterns and understand the patterns of movement.
Yeah.
Do your hands-on work, and then if there was any rehabilitation that had to be done, you'd kind of say, well, go off and see such and such, and they'll help you with that. You were kind of playing that part of the team member, I guess.
And you have to think, in a big, well-resourced team like that, they've got, a head physio, they've got, 3 full-time physiotherapists, but they've also got professional strength and conditioning coaches in there as well, and a head of high performance. So it's, and it has to work collaboratively.
Sure.
For everyone involved, particularly for the players to really for a player to buy in and to be, to adhere to what the protocol and to believe that they can get better in the time frame that they're espousing. And so I have no problem working in that sort of way.
Yeah, totally agree.
But it just be that. I'm really love being a team player. In fact, in that environment, it's a little bit sort of. There's some freedom in it, to be honest, Sammy. It's that I'm not fully responsible for these people. That I can do my little thing and be a little cog in the engine. So classically, if a player out there, has a hamstring strain, that the physios will hand them to me and say, can you please do your thing in regards to the pelvis and and the rest of the body, and and then I hand them back.
Right. Well, at the very least, that's a good acknowledgement that what you do actually works, right? That's the first thing. But also, I guess, it's not so much what you do, but I guess osteopathy, right? Osteopathy works because you've got people that are high performance, and they're saying, well, look, we're getting results because Bruce has done X, Y, Z, and now we can do our thing. And our job is actually a lot easier because Bruce has done his job. And so I think that's worth a lot. I think that's worth a lot. It's important. But also, I think that I totally agree with you in that collaborative environment, especially if you've got people of the same caliber on the same page. That I think works fantastically well. What I did want to ask you is that tell me about some of the relationships you built with the players. I mean, were there players that were just like, wow, Bruce, we love you, mate. We just want to come and see you, or we want to. I mean, did you build those kind of really good relationships with players?
Yeah, and it's a really satisfying part of the relationship and the job that I have there. So typically I'm there on their main training day, just in the afternoon. I do a 3 plus hour shift, and so I'm one of the practitioners up on the whiteboard, and the players can choose to put their number up in my time slots, or the head doc or the physios would put a player up there. But really, most of my spots are filled with players just nominating themselves. Most weeks just wanting to get freed up and get their thoracics and ribs and just love getting the work done.
And I'm sure that's part of the decision of the high performance manager would be player feedback, right? Like, if the players are saying, look, we love what Bruce is doing, it's like there's a no-brainer there to, I guess, keep you on and keep osteopathy as part of the team.
Yeah.
Right.
And we all got all part-timers, all the external practitioners, non-full-timers got cut through COVID, both because they didn't want people coming in, to exposing the players, and they had huge budgetary cuts. So I was one of the ones that got cut for a little while. But as COVID settled and as their budget restored a bit, apparently I was one of the ones that was asked to come back.
And did you have a lot of players that would come and see you in private practice?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great. All right.
And then because the head of high performance from Hawthorn ended up getting poached to Carlton, and Carlton Footy Club's literally across the road from me in the clinic. And so he's been over the last. He was there for 5 years. He's recently just finished in AFL, but for the last 5 years, he's been sending me Carlton players
Right.
into the clinic, and then I'm continuing to see regularly some Carlton players that choose to come in.
Great, great, mates. I want to, I guess, just discuss a little bit about your current, I guess, practice environment.
Mm.
Tell us about, I guess, a week in the life of Bruce. Tell us about your work week. I mean, how are you working these days? Are you 5 days a week? Are you treating, as
Mm.
much as you used to? What's your volume like? How do you
Mm.
like to treat? What's your approach in terms of seeing a new patient? Are you somebody that are you a reductionist? Do you keep things just simple and straight to the point and kind of get your work done, or do you like to kind of? I know speaking to a lot of practitioners, they like to discuss maybe more neuro-emotional things and things of
Yeah,
that aspect. How are you managing practice life in these days?
yeah. The neuro emotional side of things is really interesting. My wife Louise is a psychotherapist, so I've been really blessed and really well informed and broadened my practice through her insights, and she's been directly involved in the practice from a back end point of view. She's also at times consulted and seen clients from one of our treatment rooms, but she continues to sort of manage the back end of our clinic as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, just her insights uh, from that point of view has been greatly influenced my practice. But a typical, I'm still working pretty solidly. I've got three two adult boys and one about to finish high school. So
They cost
yeah,
money.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So lucky I still love what I do. But yeah, I'm still seeing a pretty good volume of
Yeah.
more yeah more than 50 more than 50 a week plus my Hawthorn work.
Mhm.
And so
It
yeah,
is
roughly a
it.
half hour list I treat on, and uh, I have. But what's lovely in our clinic, and I can highly recommend this. I've done this all the last 20 years. There's a common, the 10:30 slot of a morning is a common time for us across all the associates. So it's just a bit of a morning tea time. It's the time so whoever finishes, well, I've got a nice coffee machine at work, and whoever finishes first runs and makes coffees for everyone. And yeah, it's a great time to just debrief, or just go stand outside for a few minutes and catch up, or discuss a patient if need be. And so yeah, that's a really special time. Um, I'm really lucky with my associates. I've had Carl Ridgway with me for over 20 years, part time. Like he also teaches at RMIT in the education department. But yeah, we usually get to work early and have coffee together as well. Um, And yeah, lunch times is often a common time as well, I'm available to the associates to have a chat if need be, or debrief, or mentor, or go through whatever. So yeah, I'm there a lot, but I really love it. I love my relationships with my associates. I've got brilliant associates.
How have you found I guess um, the neediness, or have what associates needed from you changed in the last 10 years, 10 to 12 years? Tell us how that's changed. Like, well, what did you
Yeah,
find? What are you having to do more of and less of these days with associates to get them up to scratch?
Yeah. Uh, I guess I've still been really lucky in that regard that I've chosen well. They've been a really good fit, both from a personality point of view. But I guess what's changed over the last 5 years, I never used to check their hands-on abilities in terms of at the interview stage. But I've definitely got to doing that over the last 5 or 6 years, just because.
Did you
Yeah,
used to assume that it was just there? I mean, was that just assume
I feel
that?
like I could. I used to assume that it was there, but I sort of felt like I could almost tell by people's personalities what they would be
Right,
like
right.
hands on. Just that open personality, and that would be showing through their hands.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just do perhaps with the perhaps the curriculum in the courses is not what it was in terms of the volume of hands-on work. So I've come to getting them to do some techniques on me at the interview stage, which has been really informative. Um,
Have you had to say to somebody, look, you're probably not going to be a good fit because of their skill level?
um,
Or have you taken somebody on that you later thought, I shouldn't have done that because they weren't up to scratch?
no, I haven't yet.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I've definitely not taken people on because I felt that it was a bridge too far. Their
Right.
skill set, yeah.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
but I did have choice, because
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to get a couple of applicants. Certainly not overrun with applicants though, Sammy.
Mm.
Like even though I'm in the heartland
Mm.
and have a decent name in Melbourne, I'll advertise and I'm not overrun with applicants. I can tell you.
Does
Yeah.
that worry you, Bruce, moving into the future? Like, are you worried about, I guess, the hands-on skill set? I mean, if we lose that, I mean, that's why you're at Hawthorn, right?
Yeah.
They really appreciate what you do there in terms of your skill set, hands-on skill set.
Yeah.
Does that worry you into the future in terms of
Yeah.
what's coming out?
Yes, it does. It's you know, I think it's really complex where the education system is sitting. There's no simple answer.
Mm.
Part of me can understand how they've come to be how they are,
Mm.
but yeah, it is. It is. I still think it can come into balance. I still think that it can improve.
Yeah.
Um, I think in many ways, Sammy, broadly speaking, it's a matter of survival, and some of us, and I do hear criticisms of the courses, but the flip side is, RMIT have lost the chiropractic course, right?
Mm.
And I don't know why, but I do suspect it was because partly they may not have been towing the broader line and the broader, looking at the broader issues.
Mm.
So there are lots of external forces at play, and that the I'm sure the RMIT course has been forced to pivot to becoming, whatever we're going to call it, evidence informed,
Mm.
to you know quieten the external hounds, and potentially have our course cancelled,
Mm.
and so do I think it's gone too far? Probably.
Mm.
Do I think the fact that I think they've done a really good job in able to keeping the course, just going, when it's an expensive course,
Mm.
and as I said, there's we're playing with some very powerful forces externally. Um, so that's my sort of
Okay.
view on that.
So this is, I guess, the conversation we had earlier about the internship model, the
Mm.
internship system, and
Yeah,
this I want to go back to that point
yeah,
because this is where it kind of gets highlighted really well. Is that if you have an applicant and or somebody that's doing an internship with you. I mean, you can really spend 6 months on really fine tuning what they can do and get them to a point where you can offer them a job, you
Yeah.
know? And
And
so, I mean, what you said earlier, everything that you just said, I don't think there's a point there that I disagree with. I think there's influences that are moving professions like ours in certain directions, whether it's by construct or whether it's by just serendipity and the way things are going. I'm
mm,
not going to, I guess, point fingers, but it comes back to us. I spoke to a colleague last week about his experience with new graduates. He said, "Look, I can only control what I can control. I can't control what's happening at university and regulation and all that kind of stuff." And so he's got a system in place where he teaches people, how to a mentorship system. And I guess as a profession, we just need to be able to control what we can control,
mm,
and we have to come up with a better solution to what's going on. We can't expect the universities to solve that problem for us because they don't want. I don't think they want to solve that problem. I don't think they see it as a problem. And so
mm,
if they don't see it as a problem, there's nothing there they're not going to put anything in place to solve it. So as a profession, especially through the professional association, I think we have to have something in place or at least speak up and say, look, this is a model that we think will be best in terms of at least safeguarding what we do as osteopaths. And then maybe speak to the universities about that. Something that's low cost, easy to implement, and takes away the burden from the universities of trying to get them, osteopathically educated. What do now that we've kind of had that discussion earlier about the internship system and what you discussed just then, is that something that you could, is that something you'd agree with, you disagree with, you want to push back on that? Like, what are your thoughts on
no,
that?
that there's great merit in that.
Hello, everyone. Just a quick break to give you some information on where to best find me. The first place is the private Facebook group called the Successful Practitioner Pathway. I've set up this private group as a place where practitioners can go and get tips and advice on how to best accelerate their practice and improve their clinical practice skills. The second place to find me is at successinpractice.net. That is where the Success in Practice signature program is housed. You can find more information about me and how I can best help you achieve success in your practice. So, the two best places, the private Facebook group, the Successful Practitioner Pathway, and successinpractice.net. I will link to both those places in the show notes. So, for more information, please see the show notes. Now, enjoy and back to the show.
In fact, you know, a few of my associates have been through a similar system. I was just talking to Kira, one of my associates, earlier, that she through the university process, she was able to do in her last, I'm not sure how many months, but she did 2 full days in a clinic in Victoria. And that was a really, really good experience for her.
Yeah.
And so,
Can you imagine what 6 months would do?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I very much still, part of me, like would want to put it back on the students too, to upskill themselves,
Yeah.
and seek out, contacts through,
Yep.
and go and have a coffee
Yeah.
with a practitioner, or go and observe, and just
Shadow.
creating relationships. And so whether it's, but in essence, I think some sort of internship would be a really valuable thing. But
Yeah.
and that's not all clinics are equal though too, Sammy. Like whether there's a will there in clinics and they're set up, it's quite.
There's got to be a process in place where I guess the clinic and the people at the clinic who are going to be responsible supervisors have to have some kind of level of education and I guess an objective way that they can measure competency and apply that across the board so that you're not getting one student that's getting a certain exposure at one clinic and then somebody that's getting a whole different quality of exposure at another clinic.
Yes.
Whilst there will be slight nuances and differences, I think that, but I don't think that's unachievable. Psychologists do it, and architects do it, and a lot of other professions have this model in place, and there's no reason
Yeah.
why we couldn't do it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
No, there's
look,
merit.
yeah, we could. This is a big topic of discussion. I think
Yeah.
there's probably some kind of merit in having a big round table with some people that have, I guess, more influence, and it's good
Mm.
to maybe get those and have a chat to them.
Mm.
Look, I want to move on to because we don't have a lot of time left. I want to move on to the advanced titling, or the titling
Mm.
structure that I
Mm.
guess you've helped implement over with
Mm.
Osteopathy Australia.
Mm.
Tell us about the genesis of that. How did that all start? And
Yeah.
I mean, look, we've had a private conversation about it a while ago.
Yeah.
I'm not its biggest fan, but
Mm.
I don't mind it as a concept.
Mm.
But we'll discuss that. I want to let you, I guess, tell us about it. Tell us how it started, and tell us
Yeah.
what's involved.
Yeah. It was. I wasn't. I was invited onto the committee
Hmm.
to establish the pathway. I wasn't the first one on the committee. It had been just established before me, but it wasn't long after before I was invited on. And it
So
was
who were you
Peter
invited
Lally.
by?
Beg
Peter
pardon?
Lally.
Peter
Who were you
Lally at the
invited?
time.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. All
and
right.
amazing man. Like he did some, from my perspective, he had great energy and he did some amazing things and was really strong on on policy and very positive guy, and kept us all kept it all. It took time, I have to say, but there was a lot to process, and we looked at other models, the physiotherapy model, and so yeah, in essence, we ended up coming up with two pathways, which is so there's titling in sports, there's pediatrics, there's work
There's pain management.
pain
There's
management,
occupational
workplace,
health and
and
safety.
exercise,
That's right. Okay.
rehab type. Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry for not getting those titles quite correct, but I'm only was involved in the sports pathway in
Mm.
the committee. And so, yeah, we ended up coming out with two pathways. You can either by further tertiary education. So you could, in regards, in the case of sports, you might do a master's in sport, strength and conditioning. That would absolutely qualify you for get you a long way along to the titling as an advanced sports osteopath. Or there's what we call the vocational pathway, which is a whole bunch of things to tick off, and one is that you need to complete. I think it's still 120 hours of sports related CPD over a 5 to 7 year period. Which we've got a requirement to do CPD anyway, so I sort of naturally had most of those hours ticked off. The then the writing up of two or three case studies that are quite in depth, um, uh, and using some evidence base, but you absolutely can put in how you approach that case from an osteopathic point of view, but you also need to if there's rehab involved, that needs to be there needs to be evidence behind that, and you need to be well read around that. So, and you need some external references as well, not just osteopaths, but some sports related references that can vouch for you. So it's not an easy thing, but it can't be easy because it
No.
needs to be worthwhile. It needs to be relevant, and to have any teeth whatsoever, it needs to be it needs to be. It can't be just a signing of a piece of paper. So yeah, I thought I'd put my money where my mouth is, and I went through. I paid my money and literally, and went through the process and got myself titled, and just to try it out. Why? I think it's a good thing. I'd already had my job at Hawthorn, but once I'd completed it, Hawthorn were really pleased that I'd completed it and wanted to know all about it, and they've put that on my file, and that can certainly help my ongoing relationship with them. But the idea of it, why it's good for the profession, is that if we can get a core group of sports titled osteopaths or pediatrics, then that potentially puts us in the room to be of influence to external providers. Say with the Sports Medicine Australia, or if there's future legislation on sports involved activities. So we can speak as a group, and we can comment from a position of supposed knowledge, I guess. So I like the idea of it, of a bunch of advanced titled osteopaths helping not just themselves, but helping the whole profession, and being an advocate for the whole profession, and writing articles on behalf of the profession, and just that's the main benefit of it.
Right. And do you have to be a member of Osteopathy Australia to get the title?
That is a good question. I do not know the answer to that.
I didn't mean to ask you a question that you didn't have an answer to. I thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward question.
I suspect you do. You do. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll push back a little bit. I guess some of the concerns or the criticism I had was that the regulation aspect of it always seems to come into play. And I guess we feel like as a profession we're already very regulated with APRA. With what you can say and what you can't say, what you can advertise and what you can't advertise, and I guess just add another layer of regulation. You're right, there are pros and cons to it, and the pros are that when you get to sit into a room, I guess you have a group there that can at least speak on behalf of the profession with some kind of, I guess, advanced knowledge. But in terms of actually having an effect on getting patients into your clinic, I always thought that the market decides that based on the quality of your care and how well you I guess you brand yourself, and then you're actually producing results for patients. I mean, given your experience with Hawthorn, had that high performance manager sat there in your room and you couldn't do diddly squat compared to what you said you could, he probably would have just walked out and said thank you but no thanks. So ultimately your skill set spoke for itself. So I guess the regulatory point of view was one of the reasons why I wasn't a big fan of it.
I don't understand though how it actually does increase besides the actual process of going through getting the titling. It's not increasing our regulatory pressure.
It always seems that when you start labeling things, it probably won't happen in the near future, but I see it happening down the track, where later on, you won't be able to, I guess, treat or call yourself, or at least market yourself to a certain market without having that particular title. And so that then presents itself, especially to osteopaths. I mean, there are many osteopaths out there who are very effective generalists. They can, you were one of those osteopaths, I'm sure, and you probably are still one of those osteopaths, who can look at an athlete, average weekend warrior, or somebody who's not active and just sits behind a desk, somebody who's got a workplace injury, somebody. You can even go into some younger age patients that are at school and having those kinds of issues. And so, being an effective generalist, you don't mind seeing sports performance athletes to treat them. And I guess we don't want to get to a point where those people who are generalists can't see can't see those people, you know.
Well,
So
I have no fear that will ever be the case. Absolutely
yeah,
none. I cannot see that ever being an issue at all. That there'll be because people are titled in a particular field, then that then is going to limit the generalists from treating those very same people. And you make a very good point. Is that if you have the market rules, and so if you're strong in that area, you have a great name in that area, you're still going to be busy,
yeah.
regardless title or not. So
Yeah,
yeah,
currently I don't think that's a problem. I don't know. It's not so much that you wouldn't be able to see people, but more so from a marketing point of view. You know, what you can and can't say might be a bit more restricted. So, but that's not happening at the moment. And I guess we're still we're still a young profession. We're still when I say young, we're a small profession. And I guess also my main thing was that one of the things I saw in Melbourne was the growth of the profession as those two universities just started pumping out graduates. And I guess volume speaks, you know, largely in numbers. And, you know, we want that kind of across the board in terms of every single state in the country if we can. And like I said, I'm not totally against it. I just hope that the titling itself can be expanded, and especially for the generalists out there, right? To have maybe a title who maybe you're a generalist, or maybe some kind of thing that lets you say, look, I can still treat you even if you're an athlete or this or that or whatever. And so, yeah, just like I said, it added just another layer of regulation to what we thought was already something that was a bit overregulated. And so, but I don't think it's something that we can not have, because it's happening now and it's happening with the other professions. And, you know, like I said, like you said, to have a seat at the table, we gotta have that kind of
I think so.
structure.
Yeah.
I don't know if the association may be the right. I don't know how other professions do it. Have you looked at the other professions and what they do, Bruce? Do they go through their associations to get to that advanced title?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the other professions would use their main
Yeah.
association to organise that sort of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, right. Yeah. So then that, I guess, makes it a little bit more, that incentivizes people, I guess, to join the association.
as they should.
As they should. Yeah, that's right. So it's good. We just hope, I think, well, I mean, I would like to get clarification on that. So I hope somebody clarifies it. I mean, currently, if you're not a member of the association,
Well,
uh,
for thinking about it, I dare say you would need to be a member of Osteopathy Australia to
yeah.
go through that
So
process.
do you think that might restrict people in terms of trying to get the title?
Well, I
If
would hope that they might be.
Because that puts the price up for the. I mean, I don't think the titling is very expensive from what I've looked at. It's a few
No,
$100s.
I don't believe it is. But yeah,
No.
I hope from my point of view, I'm a big believer in what Osteopathy Australia does. I'm a big fan. I don't think they're perfect, but I think they do much more than what people realise, and they should be members. And I listened to a podcast. Yours, is it Ali in Canberra?
Ali
Who,
Simmons, yeah.
yeah,
That was like last week's.
yeah, who like, and I love listening to her, and like sounds like a wonderful practitioner. But it broke my heart, to be honest, to say that she didn't renew her membership because she had an issue with that. Osteopathy Australia couldn't do anything about the course, and I really don't. Yeah, and that's the whole another debate. But she'd only earlier in the podcast said that if it wasn't for Comcare, like early on in her practice, she couldn't. She wouldn't have survived. She wouldn't have been able to set up her practice. The reason why the reason why we've got eligibility to claim under Comcare and all these different insurances is because we get great advocacy from Osteopathy Australia, right? So yeah, that's an example of it. How like it made no sense to me. But anyway, that's
Yeah, look, there's that. Like everyone's going to have. The funny thing is, having this podcast, it kind of turns you into a bit of a someone that people reach out to when they have a kind of grievance, right? And so I do get people kind of reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, we're a bit upset at this, we're a bit upset at that. Can you talk about this? Can you talk about that?" And so you do hear a lot of that. I'm largely looking at the association. I guess I'm a member of the association. I'm a big believer in membership. I'm a big believer in associations. I feel that I guess we'd like to see a course here in Sydney. I've made I'm not hiding that at all. I think that's one thing we feel a little bit like. I guess we don't get enough information about what's going on and who they're talking to. But as Matt Cooper kind of said on the podcast with me, that's a lot of that has to stay confidential.
yeah,
And I would like to see, I guess, just a little bit more in terms of reaching out and talking to people that haven't renewed, right? There's people like, I spoke to John Smart, an osteopath who graduated a year before me, and he's not a member, he just doesn't see the value in it. And so some people don't see the value in it. I guess instead of just trying to get new graduates that are coming out as part members, we don't want to neglect the people that have been members for a long time and then decided, I'm not getting out of this. And so I'm not going to become a member. I think we need to attract those people back and see we've done something to, I guess, lose them, and what is it that needs to come back. And I think a part of that is, Bruce, is that I would like to see the association, I guess, advocate more for osteopathy in the classical sense, right? I think there's a shift moving towards amalgamating professions and what they do. And we'd like to see Osteopathy Australia have a position that is clear about osteopathy in itself, and that there is a difference between osteopathy and some other professions. And so that's my feedback on that. But mate, I wanted to ask you about some of the current challenges and some of the things to look forward to, but I think we've covered a lot of that.
yeah.
And so I guess
My boys might be waiting to be
yeah,
picked up.
yeah, no. I'll have to thank you for your time tonight.
I've really enjoyed it, mate.
Yeah, maybe what I'll do, maybe I'll tee up another time with you to go through some questions for the students.
Love to.
We'll do that another time.
Yeah, no problem.
But for everybody else, I'll thank Bruce for joining us tonight. Just stay on with me on the line just for another minute or so after I stop the recording.
Yeah.
But everybody else, thank you for your attention. Bruce, thank you for tonight.
Thanks so much, Sammy.